When should you take profits, Katie? This is something that you and I, and all of our years trading and helping people learn how to invest and trade options, trade futures, a question that comes up all the time. Now, it's a good question if you're, hey, I put on this futures trade, I'm up $100. That's always a good position to be in. I wanted to hammer home when you should take profits relative to stock shares, to futures, to options, hopefully cover all of our bases with a hopefully straightforward answer. I mean, you're used to complex strategies using options like strangles, iron condors, naked puts, naked calls, ratio spreads, and everything else. What is usually your response for like, hey, I've got this complex strategy. Where should I take the thing off? Do you have a catch-all, or is it more specific to the particular strategy for you?
It's kind of specific, like I'm in second grade. It's kind of specific.
West Coast, yes.
It's kind of specific to the strategy, but I think you're making a really good point in the sense that like, this is something I need to remind myself of all the time is like, if I'm having a crummy couple of days in my portfolio, it's so hard to see a winning trade and not want to milk it for even more. But it's so important to kind of like have these boundaries for yourselves or benchmarks for yourself so that, if you are tempted, either, from a profit perspective or from a loss perspective, that you're trying to remove some of that emotion. But for me, it is more kind of specific to like the velocity of how quickly I'm making a profit and the strategy that I'm using, if it's like defined versus undefined. But I think what you're setting up today is a really great place to start. And then you can figure out where your specific wiggle room is if you have it.
100%. Yeah. We're going to set up just a nice baseline, a simple rule here, and you can be flexible around that. But the worst thing is, I'm just not even going to think about taking profits and I'm just going to let something run to some unrealistic goal. That's the worst thing, because what you want to do, even if it's as simple as buying Apple shares or, trading strangles or trading futures, what have you, what you want to do is you want to put on a position you think is going to be profitable, take some profits in it, and then a couple of days, a week, a month down the line, put on that trade again at better prices. Like that's the whole point of being active with your trading or investing versus being passive. And so definitely think about taking profits in all your trades. And it almost always, Katie, for me, is a function of how much that market that you're trading has moved. So the idea here is, okay, I want to buy Apple shares with a time frame of like, I'd like to have it in my portfolio for about a year. What would be a good place in the next year to take profits on that market, on that trade that I'm committing here, long Apple shares? Well, look at the last year of action. How much has it moved? And I can build a realistic assumption off of that. Maybe you can start to highlight this rule that I'm just either calling like the rule of half or just the rule of 50%. That you can apply to really any strategy, any market. But here in terms of Apple, Katie, the market's moved $70 in the last year. Right. Maybe I'll look at taking half of that.
Yeah. And I think that's really an interesting way of doing it. And like you said, of course, it kind of depends, and we'll get into like the specific other products that we're trading here. But I like the idea of like the rule of halves. We'll come up with some really cool name for it, but that's a good brainstorming name for it. But yeah, as you can see here, as what you're seeing, you're just taking like the recent highs and, where the lows have kind of been over the last year to 6 months or whatever time frame you want to kind of define. I like year if you're going to think about maybe using or holding this position for a year, taking half of that to get you, okay, $35 a share on Apple would be satisfactory to me.
Yeah, it's really, I think people take for granted how much information they have at their fingertips. A lot of people will reach out and be like, hey, I saw you put on this cool strategy. I saw you buy this or sell that. What would you be looking to take out of it? And it's like, well, friend, you have all the parameters. How long were you thinking about having this trade on? A week? Well, what has that trade in the last week been capable of? I'm trying to take about 50% of that. If I'm trying to buy Apple, Katie, for the next month, and I see in the last month, it's traded in a range of about $30, then $15 is a pretty good profit for me in the next month moving forward. And you can lend this same type of management strategy here with differing timeframes and differing strategies to futures, to options, and everything else. In futures, what's really nice is you actually don't a lot of times have to look at historical data because the margin lets you know really what that market's capable of doing. So when I'm trading futures and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to buy this thing or sell this thing for the next couple of weeks, because all the small exchange futures, they expire monthly. So the idea is I'm going to have it on for maybe a couple of weeks. The margin is telling me what that market is likely to move in the next couple of weeks. And I'm just looking for 50% of that, Katie.
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of? Maybe this is a tangent and I know we'll get to the options piece here. It reminds me of when we were younger and, they talk about goal setting and they call them SMART goals. Do you remember those? Where it was like,
yeah, absolutely,
specific, measurable, like attainable, relevant, and like time-based. And I think the piece that trips people up, and I'll stop talking after this, is that time piece. Like they move their own goalpost with timing. Yeah. But here, if you give yourself a specific amount of time, it's easier to possibly achieve the goal that you're setting out. And in this instance, it's the profit target.
100%. It is like, of course, anyone can be an astronaut. Like if you really work towards it, like great. But if it's like, I want to be an astronaut and I'm not actually going to work towards it, it's not realistic to think you're going to be an astronaut. The same goes with similar space aged market, Bitcoin, and a lot of people just being like, oh, I'm going to hold this to 100K. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, because 100K, that's the number. And it's like, well, in the last year, it's traded in a range of like $10,000. And if you bought it and then sold it for a $5,000 profit and then let it come back, you could buy it again. Like that's more realistic. That's what we're talking about here. The same goes for options. And I know a lot of you out there actually probably started with this similar type rule where it's like, I'm selling a strangle for, $50. I'm getting a $50 credit on it. I'll look for $25, or I'm buying a call for $30. I'll look to make $15 on it. Like, it's not perfect, Katie, but it's a good baseline to start with, right?
I think that's the biggest takeaway is there are so many people out there that reach out about this kind of information and like rely on us to share it. And this is us sharing it right now, is that like you have the tools at your disposal, as you said, to kind of set up your own benchmarks, but starting at the 50% measure is, a great place to kind of then determine if it fits your risk tolerance, if it fits your portfolio size, if it fits the product you're trading, all that good stuff.
Katie, couldn't have said it better myself. You are absolutely tops. I look forward to seeing your next haircut in the coming weeks. When are you getting a haircut?
Not for a while, probably not for another like month or two, but I'll give you the heads up.
All right, cool. I'm not gonna give Mikey Butler the heads up, and
Thank you.
We're gonna see if he can actually do it. Katie, thanks so much. Make sure you check out Katie on Twitter and everywhere else. She's amazing trader and just human being. Everybody, you're amazing human beings as well for watching our show. Thanks for the support and everything else. Splash into Futures is coming on next. You're not gonna want to miss that. Get ready for the FOMC minutes, everybody. Hopefully, it's a fun trade. Have a good night. Peace.